Well, just when we think we can't deal with any more vintage Pioneer gear, in comes this one. It's an SA 8500. Now, the last video we did on one of these SAs was an SA 7500. This is a higher end model. They share a lot of similarities. The main difference is the wattage. The 7500 is rated at about 40 watts per channel into 8 ohms. And this one, to my understanding, is 60 or 65 per channel. So it's a little more power. They've added some controls, the microphone level, some things like that are a little different. But other than that, they're pretty much the same machine. And, not a whole lot of extra, One thing, this one is in very rough shape compared to the other one. These knobs almost don't turn. I'm afraid to turn them that I'll break them. They're so frozen up. I haven't taken this apart yet, so you're going to find out just at the same time I do what it looks like inside. It apparently has issues. I purchased it for a very reasonable price, and hopefully it's restorable. This is a fantastic amplifier when they work, so I'm really hoping we can get this one going. Bear with me as we do another Pioneer here, and again, I don't blame you if you don't want to sit through another one, but the condition this one's in, it might make it an interesting video because of some of the challenges we're probably going to run into. So I thought, well, we'll go ahead and do a video on this one. You can always not watch it, I guess. So first of all, I'm not going to plug it in. I never plug in something that's this rough, because if there is problems, I don't want to make them even worse. So we're going to take it apart and just do a visual inspection. We're going to bring it up slowly and find out what's wrong with this before we really go crazy putting full power to it. So once I get the cover off here, we'll lift it off together and see what we see. Okay, time for the big reveal. I don't know what we're going to find in here, but it's pretty crusty on the outside. So let's see what this looks like. Okay, well, if you go back to my SX 7500 video, I think you'll notice that this one, very similar layout. The capacitors are 15,000 microfarads at, let's see here, yep, 15,000. And the SX 7500s are 10,000, I think, or yeah, 10,000. So there are some little differences, but like I said, just to bigger power supply. Instead of having 2 outputs on each channel, this one has 4 output transistors on each channel to handle the increased power. Other than that, a lot of similarities here. Got your preamp section. You got your I think the phono section here, and of course your mode select and volume is here. You have your main power amp here, and fortunately it looks like this thing is completely, totally untouched. It doesn't look like it was ever opened, ever worked on by anybody. Of course we could flip it over and find a mess, but so far on the top, I don't believe anybody has ever serviced this, and that's actually a good thing. I'd rather find a basket case machine like this that's never been touched, that has issues, than have one that looks nicer but somebody else that wasn't trained or didn't know the equipment tried to work on previously, because then you got to fix all those issues before you can go ahead and fix the original issues that caused the problem in the first place. So that's a good sign. Most of this is dust and dirt, and most of it looks like it's back here because that's where the air vents on the covers were. So luckily the cover seems to have protected most of the inside of this. So I'm kind of thinking when we flip this over, the underneath should be even cleaner. So let's flip it over and check. We'll check a few things, look at some fuses to see if they're blown. I mean, I can see right here some of the fuses. I'll test those, see if they're all good, and we'll go from there. Alright, so we're in the bottom, and as I suspected, again, it looks totally untouched in there. Of course, we have some spiders that decided to take up residence in here, so we will have to clean that all out. But other than that, we have a fully intact amplifier. Now, I'm going to sound like a broken record here. It seems like I always talk about this in every video, but let's talk capacitors again. Pioneer in this era used some of the finest, highest quality caps you could buy at the time, and they really last very well. Most of the time, if you didn't change the capacitors in here, it wouldn't make a difference. The machine would play, it would sound decent, but two things could be affected. Thing number one is less important. It's more important to sound than it is to, to safety. But as these things age, the capacitors change value a little bit, and what will happen is you'll see it suffer either in the lows or the highs. A lot of times in the highs, when you get to the treble, it sounds dull. The sound doesn't sound as crisp. And in the bass, sometimes the bass doesn't go as low, doesn't sound as solid. You might get distortion sooner as you turn the volume up. So all those things are affected. And again, some people will hear that, some people won't. It depends on the quality of speakers, depends on how demanding you are when you're listening to your music, what type of music you listen to. But it won't hurt the amp to play it with the original components in most cases. The second thing about capacitors, which is the reason I tend to recap anything that's 30 years old or more, is that, and 30 years is kind of my cutoff point, although it's case by case after that. But 30 years old, I pretty much do it, regardless of what condition it's in, unless it's collectible and it affects the value or something. But the other reason is, as the caps age, their ESR, or equivalent series resistance, can change, okay, as they age and dry out and so forth. And what that'll do is, one or two of them, you really won't notice it. It won't affect anything. They still work. They still store energy. They still filter. However, each little bit of ESR, extra ESR on each capacitor, adds up. It's an additive effect. And the more ESR overall, the more it's going to demand of your power supplies. And what I've noticed on these machines here is when you get to that level, what starts happening is the power supplies, especially like your 13 volt and so forth, those regulators, that little extra couple hundred milliamps of current makes a big difference. Those extra couple hundred milliamps is dissipated heat in those transistors, and they already run warm when they're brand new. But they really run warm. Some of them will get so hot you can't even touch the transistors. And I used to think it was the transistors themselves, but it's really not. What it is all the capacitors that are old in there are, since they have a higher ESR, to get the same current through the transistors and through the circuit, you're basically drawing more energy from that power supply, and it's running hot. And quite often, after I've done a recap, I've noticed without touching the power supply, my transistors run cooler in the power supply, and that's the reason why. So pretty much, if I decide I'm going to fix one of these up and go over it, they get recapped for that reason, if for nothing else. And even if that's not a big issue, say it kept in a good area, low humidity, good temperature, so forth, even at that, who wants to go through all this, testing it and cleaning it and doing everything, and only to have a couple years later into it, the caps start to go? So 30 years, it's going to start, just do it. A handful of capacitors, $20 worth or so, it'll do wonders. So let's get this cleaned up and let's get it ready to do a power test. Okay, I cleaned this thing up. It was pretty filthy, and I had to throw in a RCA patch cord, as you can see, because the jumpers were missing from the preamp in and out. And I cleaned up the PC boards, and before I did anything, I cleaned all the controls. They now work a lot easier now. I don't know how the tone section works with these old caps and so forth. Not worried about it. Powered it up on a dim bulb, and everything seemed to work perfectly, and the relay came in just fine. And everything, even the power supply transistors, are running really cool. So I connected up the signal generator, and I'm at 200 hertz just because that's how the signal generator came up right now. And I have my scope hooked up, and I'm going to feed 150 millivolts peak to peak into the inputs, which should give us plenty of power to get to get full output. And we're going to crank up the volume here, and we're using our new, just assembled dummy load module. And I'm at times 10 attenuator, so really this would be 20 volts per division. And I have my voltmeter connected up right now, so actually let's see if we can get this whole thing into the shot. I'll try to hold this meter over here, and then we'll see just what it is we get. Yep, we got it. Okay, hopefully you guys can see this. And let's bring it up till it just comes to clipping. So far so good, look at that. Totally clear. Right about there we're clipping. And I'm running about about 23 volts, just a little under 23 volts. So let's say, just for a safe measure, let's say 22.5 volts RMS. Okay, so we take our 22.5 times 22.5, divide that by 8. 63.2 watts out of a 60 watt amplifier with no modifications, 30-year-old components, everything. So I would say, because this thing was crusty and dirty and the knobs were hard to turn and those jumpers were missing, whoever owned this really just kind of thought that there was a big problem with it. But really, this thing is in perfect condition. Looking at the right there at the we're on DC, and I can just tell by looking at my scope, there's the DC offset's even pretty close. I mean, it's not, if I even drop this down to ×1, which is 2 volts per division, and then I take this maybe to ½ volt per division, as you can see, there's absolutely nothing. So I don't even think it needs adjusted. The only thing I did notice was when we ran this thing up to clipping, I did notice that one channel, okay, let's get in there nice and close and tight, one channel kind of breaks up unevenly. Now this one here, you can see the bottom and the top of the waveform are clipping equally. This one isn't quite clipping yet, okay, which tells me, and then when it does, this side clips just about the same. So one channel breaks up before the other a little bit, and that could be the bias being off just by a hair. And when I say a hair, just barely touch the pot, and that'll bring it in. So I haven't done any voltage measurements. I haven't checked any capacitors. I haven't really looked at the power supply for ripple or noise or anything, but just by how this thing's working, I'm going to say everything in here is almost perfect, with the exception of maybe, some of the tone control capacitors. And again, I won't know until I listen to it, how the tone amp's doing. But this thing's, it just goes to show the quality and the build craftsmanship that goes into anything from this era. I mean, this truly was the golden era of stereo. Pioneer's just one, but the Sansuis, the Marantz, the Macintosh, Kenwood, all those names, they're all like that. Just they were in competition with one another. It wasn't to see who could be the cheapest. It was who could be the very, very best. And people were willing to pay for that quality. And they were rewarded by paying for it, because think about it. If you'd have paid for this 30 some years ago and took very good care of it, it's 30 years later. You theoretically, if you just took care of it, kept it clean, cleaned the controls every now and then, literally 30 years later you could still be using this. How many other appliances or things that you buy like this, you know, cars, washing machines, refrigerator, microwave oven, television, whatever, how many can you say 30 years from now still work? So these are worth buying. They're worth having. They're worth fixing up. You know, they're overbuilt, if anything. So anyhow, that's my rant for this. But let's get into the cleaning of this, and then we'll go through and we'll do some tests of some of the power supplies. And we'll let this burn in for a little bit and see, make sure everything's good, make sure nothing's going to let go after it's been running for a while. But you know, I can just tell you, all the transistors, the outputs, you know, barely, I mean, the main heatsink for the outputs has just risen above room temperature. That's about all the warmer it is. You know, after running it at full power. And, you know, I have a feeling we can run it like that for quite some time. I mean, I'm running almost 60 watts right now, and you know, nothing's even breathing heavy. I mean, I can touch these, you know, you can go down here and you know, you can feel these transistors right here. They're not even warm to the touch. I mean, they're literally just above room temperature. Even this, and it's running right now full power, full rated power. So again, wow, I really thought this one was going to have a lot of problems, and we were going to have to find some you know, bad components or something, but really there's not much to show you all in this one. I'll run it through its paces like I do all my other amps, and put the, you know, clean it up, maybe repaint the cover on it because it's pretty bad. And I don't know, I think I'm gonna just call it a day with this one. And if I find that something starts, you know, the sound is a little bad, maybe I'll recap part of it. I don't know, but right here so far this is a good machine. So I don't even know if this video should make it to YouTube or not, because there wasn't much to show you. But that's it. I guess till next time. Okay, just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water. So I started working on this and decided maybe I was going to do some mods on it and go over it and check some things out. And the first thing I noticed was the first capacitors I took out. They're leaking. I don't know if you could see that. They are really, really leaking. And I looked, and the other thing, Pioneer, their loudness circuit always is a little bit, to me, is like a little bit weak as far as the power. So I made a couple little changes to it to see if it's any better. I can always return it to how it was, but if you look right here in this section here, when you switch in the loudness switch, basically what you're doing is you're taking this 0.018 microfarad and 12K resistor, and you're shunting them across the volume, and then you're coming through this 330 PF and going in. Okay, so, and then also you're shifting it into the center tap on the volume knob. So all I did was I raised the capacitance on this from a 330 to a 470 picofarad, and I measured and matched a set of good quality ceramic capacitors, because what came out was these little ceramic jobs here. And I increased the capacitance on this a little bit. I just went from a 0.018 to a 0.027. So it's going to make a little difference, I think. Maybe just enough to kind of make the loudness sound a little more like some of the other ones. I like a little mellow it out a little bit with the low end. You don't know if you don't try. So this thing's in the middle of getting a recap job after all. As soon as I took these out, this is not glue either. This is leakage. There are a couple of them that have adhesive on them, you know, the bigger caps that are glued down during the manufacturing process. That's not leakage, that's glue. But nevertheless, I'm going to go through this thing. This amp's worth it. It's in really good condition and very, very well built. So I can't wait to see what it sounds like. So I guess we're going to go through this and do a full restore after all. Okay, another thing I want to add to this is when these leak like this, you have to clean the top of the PC board where this came off, because all that stuff, you can see all this gunk. You don't want to leave that. It's not good for the wires. It is corrosive and can corrode the wires and tarnish them. So clean the top of the PC board before you solder your new capacitors in. Alright, just a little tip. Alright, just to give you a little comparison here. This is a good capacitor. When I removed it, there's no signs of leakage or anything. And probably when you measure it, it'll be good. But again, you can't guess when one's going to leak or not, so I'm just doing them all, but just to give you an idea that they do leak, and when they don't leak, this is what they look like. Okay, so we've got this all put together now, and as you can see, I got all the capacitors replaced. And I am absolutely flabbergasted. I cannot believe how much difference that made on this amp. I have never heard such a drastic change in sound. My two little modifications to change these 330 picofarad capacitors to 470 picofarads, and to change this 0.018 to a 0.027, just completely transformed this loudness switch, how it works. It is unbelievably different. This really turned out good. I'm very happy with how this amp turned out. And so much so that this is probably going to be my new main amplifier. Because it just really sounds good. The knob's cleaned up really well, as you can see. And like I said, all the interior came out really, really nice and clean. I made up a set of jumpers, and let's see if we have some get some music here for you, and I'll show you the difference. I know the little microphone on this camera can't do it justice, but I think you'll even be able to hear through that the difference when I turn on this loudness. So there, I don't want to get flagged for copyright, but you get the idea. What a difference. The highs on this, the treble, is just unbelievable. You know, at my age, my ears aren't as good as they used to be. I can't hear the highs as well as I used to, but I can hear treble. I can hear the high notes for the first time in a long time. So just reminds me again of how good this older equipment works. So I'm really glad I did what I did with this. It did make a big difference to take the effort and do all of the recapping and so forth. I scoped it back out with the dummy load, and it went from just barely hitting 60 watts before clipping to easily going into about 66 watts per channel, totally clean with no distortion, and like I said, good system. So again, thanks for hanging in there with me on another Pioneer. I have a really nice Kenwood coming up here that we're going to do, and it looks to be, the tuner on it is fabulous, so I think that one's going to be a really good receiver. And I am also starting a project of designing and building a vacuum tube amplifier. And once I get everything cobbled together that I want for that, we're going to start on that. And that's going to be a series. I'm not going to be able to do that in one video. It's probably going to be multiple series of videos. So, alright, for right now, that's it for this one. And as always, give me a thumbs up so we can keep this thing going. And have a great day. Thank you all.